first speaker of the day is a good friend of mine who probably prevented me from getting beaten up by anti-nuclear protesters in Germany, actually. Iida's had my back many a time, but she's also a fantastic writer and science communicator. And she's going to talk to us a bit today about risk perception and, I guess, evidence-based decision-making. So, Iida, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Eric. It's a pleasure to meet you online, even this way. You can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, it was quite a road for me to come to the point where we met, basically in the middle of the anti-nuclear demonstration. And had it been a little bit earlier, it even might have been that I would have been among the anti-nuclear demonstrators, because that was my starting point. And I think lots of us start there. So I am, as Eric said, I'm Iida Ruishalme. I'm a biologist and an environmentalist. And I mean, we're many things, so we should always remember that we can be defined by many associations, and that we can connect with people through those. I'm also a mother. Nowadays, I'm actually a mother for nuclear. I don't know if you can see I even represent with my dark clothes for the appropriate but also dark day because of the closing of Indian Point. But I wouldn't have thought that back in the day. I mean, I'm an environmentalist and a tree hugger, so I was sort of, it's very much natural for me to want to protect the environment. But of course, the assumptions that we make about what may protect the environment best are not always directly the right ones. And as I was trained as a scientist, I realized that I really want to look at how you make the kind of choices that actually have the effect that we want them to have on the environment. Because it's really not that surprising after you start reading a little about risk and research into risk that we make hasty assumptions about these things. Because it turns out that we are actually really poor at assessing risks. I used to think that nuclear power had risks that were just way beyond anything of the other energy sources. That sure, you can produce a lot of energy, but how can it be worth it when there are such extraordinary risks connected to the nuclear? And I just knew this. Everybody just knew this. It wasn't that I had to go and check, is it really like this? I had already made it was a very empathic, very deep kind of truth that I felt, because this is what I've learned. But coming and growing as a scientist, I realized that, wow, okay, I just know this is a really risky position to take. And why is it that we make such easy false assumptions, actually? Nature is something that we all often directly view as something good and wonderful. Me included. I want to protect nature. That was one of my starting statements. But actually, nature is such a dangerous place that while we have evolved in nature, we have developed these kind of really quick ways of assessing risks, because that's the only way to survive. So basically, we've learned to look at any threat and make a flash judgment. Is that dangerous or is it not? We don't have any time there for reflection. We simply have some shortcuts that more often than not give us the right direction, and we survive to see another day. And this is a instinctual, almost an emotional reaction. But nowadays we live in a world of abstract information, not just little sounds in the bush or strange looking objects on the ground. So we have these same shortcuts still, and we have to try to make sense of this abstract information. And this leads to a lot of errors with these heuristics, with these biases, shortcuts. And I know this as a mother. As soon as I hear about anything that could be a potential threat to my child, I will have a jolt of worry before anything else kicks in. Even though I am a scientist, it doesn't help. Even if you're a policymaker or an environmentalist or any kinds of, we all have this. Nobody is immune. And on the other hand, it's very important to realize that while we have these reactions, I as a mother, for instance, know that and if I fail continually to let these slower reflective processes of checking the evidence and seeing if this really was the best way and the safest way to go, then if I don't let that process a chance to take place, I might actually unintentionally end up causing more harm. So this is why thinking about risk really matters. And we tend to always jump into the conclusion that anything that is really unfamiliar, anything that's imposed upon us that's not in our own control, and anything that's artificial or man-made gets this, it's flagged. It's directly, it must be a threat, and we actually have to process it sometime to figure out if it's actually not a threat. This is a slow, more gradual process that takes some work. And nuclear power fits here on this, it ticks all these boxes because it's our newest source of energy. When you look at all the other sources of energy, we actually have a sense of how to tend to a fire, how to dam a little brook, what kind of powers we have if we put up a sail and we have wind blowing on it, or if we just sit in the sunlight and we feel the heat and we know what's coming. We know these kind of forces. We can touch them, we can manipulate them. And even the drawbacks of those, say we know how to deal with smoke. We know in what proportion is harmful. We know how to deal with floods. We know what's too much heat and what's too little and what to do to manage that. We know how to prepare for storms. These kind of forces we have a sense for, quite literally a sense for. But nuclear, we have no idea how to control a fission reaction, for instance. Obviously, that's just way too far from any everyday perspective. And we don't even have a sense for ionizing radiation. We can't sense it. So it's basically, it's really strange and unfamiliar thing that we can't touch. And now with our curiosity and our intellect, we have made forays into understanding the world, and we have this knowledge about it. So the knowledge of radiation is completely new to us. And this is funny because radiation is not new at all, because radiation is everywhere around us. It's a natural thing. If you, I don't know if you got my slides, I had one where I compared the sources of radiation. We can take a look at that. Because it's most of the radiation that we get is overwhelmingly from natural sources. And even though now we know about the radiation, that now we have the knowledge that okay, this place is particularly has a lot of radiation, somehow it doesn't creep into the same, it's not flagged as dangerous. And then we have, in comparison, we have this vanishingly small proportion of radiation that comes from, well, it's a small proportion that comes from man-made sources. Most of it is medical imaging. And what comes from nuclear power is such a small part, it's basically negligible. Mm-hmm. But this is the part that's associated with the fear. Even if we produced all our electricity with nuclear power, the part of radiation that would be coming from nuclear power plants and the whole life cycle of it would be vanishingly small. And even here we think about like, okay, but what if something goes wrong? And we're very afraid of nuclear accidents. And we think about nuclear accidents leaving horrible toxic wastelands after them. And if you look at the leakage released from Chernobyl accident, of course on a global scale that's also vanishingly small. There's hardly a blip there. But then you'd think that locally at least there would be a horrible environmental catastrophe after that. But it's quite amazing actually, because I've been to Chernobyl myself and I've read a lot of research papers on it, and most of them are actually to the abundance of wildlife that's taken over Chernobyl. So here we have this fear of something horribly artificial man-made radiation here in Chernobyl, whereas most of Chernobyl, the radiation levels are really low. There are many, many places in the world where you have higher natural background radiation. But when you're in Chernobyl, you have a few hotspots, you have most of the area with almost no radiation at all, and you have the wildlife roaming in and out of the place completely freely. There's actually no clear difference with the health of those even in the highest hotspots. So it's really, the natural world doesn't know. They still don't know. They still don't have this fear. And you can see that for them, there's no effect. It's the people who have been evacuated from there because of the fear, because we have such a huge, exaggerated respect for what kind of risk this could be. It's blown very much out of proportion. I don't know if it's, are you able to show the slide?
Yeah, Rezwan, if you want to do a screen share, I'm gonna go ahead and slide these right up under Iida's. I think you were the one person I forgot to put slides on. Sorry
all
about
right.
that, but we got them in there now while you were speaking. So.
All right. No, yeah, it's all right. I had them in the end there.
Yeah.
They can be nice to see a bit of a proportion on the natural versus artificial sources of radiation.
Yep. There we go.
So here we have it. It's I borrowed it from a fellow environmentalist, a Finnish environmentalist and ecomodernist, Rauli Partanen, who was tired of people's fears as well. So I really like his poignant comment there. At some point, we all need to have a serious discussion if our fear of nuclear radiation is a bit overblown. Would it be okay to have that discussion before climate system is totally ruined? And this is exactly what we should be having. It's so important, because this tendency that we have, this very natural tendency of fearing something unknown and artificial, has had some really, really risky consequences. Because there's also another slide. All right. So in this slide, before I go further, that you have actually the inhalation of radon, for instance. That's completely natural. That's from the bedrock. You have a continuous process of releasing some radon into the air. That's your highest exposure. And then you have ingestion from the materials, and then the actual direct radiation from the ground. And you see that medical, which is relatively high in comparison to everything else from man-made sources, this is also something that we don't fear at all as much, because I suppose it's a completely different setting, and it doesn't get the same kind of attention that nuclear power has gotten. And if we go to the next slide, which is from a paper that came out last year, which looked at some of the effects of the fear reactions we have, especially the fear reaction to the Fukushima accident, which has no health effects from radiation at all.
It's a preview. Rezwan, if you can go back to the 9th slide. There you go.
Yes, that one. So Careja, I'm not sure if I pronounced it right, Careja and Sato published a paper on the effects that when you close down nuclear power plants, what kind of effects do we see in human health and preventable CO2 emissions. And they looked at a couple of different countries or areas, and then they looked at timeframes. And just in Germany in the last, they're looking since Fukushima happened, there's actually been 4,600 calculated or so deaths from just the increase in air pollution from the power that could have come from the nuclear power plants that were closed down. And in the USA now, that which is a step that we're witnessing now, during the next 20 years or so, we can see an increase of about 100,000, more than 100,000 deaths, because of our fear of something that hasn't taken any lives. Nuclear power hasn't taken any US lives. It's quite amazing that our fear would overlook real human tragedies of actually losing lives and getting worse health for lots of people in the baggage as well. And this is nothing compared to then the environmental effects and the long-term effects that we have from it. It's just so sad and so tragic that we would make these decisions wanting to protect ourselves and wanting to protect the environment, and have this backfire, have this effect that we are not taking climate mitigation seriously. We're thinking that surely everything is all right and we can bring zero carbon sources offline. This is not true. That this effort is a humongous effort, and we don't have any possibilities to squander these sources of large, reliable sources of low carbon energy. So the missed opportunity for decarbonization is just heartbreaking for me. And I'm really, really sad to see Indian Point being closed. We're hurting the environment because of our error-prone shortcuts of risk perception. And in this slide, you don't even start talking about the fact that as a biologist, I really care about wildlife. And if you care about wildlife, one of the most important things is habitat. Habitat destruction is major point for environmental conservation. And nuclear is the one with the lowest footprint or lowest land use. It uses least mining resources and it needs least amount of land to produce the same amount of energy as any of the other low carbon sources. It's quite tremendous boon for any wildlife area to have its nature left untouched, because that means basically if you use a lion's share of the land, then you literally have no lions left, even if you did curb the emissions. So this is something that we really need to look at as environmentalists and as conversationists, people who want to conserve natural life. So I really hope that people will listen and think twice, that, you know, the way we think about risk, the fast way we think about risk, is too often it leads us astray. And if we really want to get to a good place, we have to stop and actually think and have the slow reflective process about what kind of things can we do to actually achieve what we want to, instead of just having the feeling that surely this much must be the way that works, when it isn't.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much, Iida. That was wonderful. We got to keep going here, somewhat quickly, but I just have, you know, one question for you. Do you think we'll be able to do it? Do you have hope for the future?
I would say that I couldn't live without having hope. But also I think that actually the effort is humongous, but the hope comes in the fact that people are actually capable of, when you begin to change, you get a momentum and people start paying attention. For a long time it can feel that nobody listens, but it's actually you're starting to hear about this from more and more sources, that people actually starting to take it seriously. So if you get a change going, suddenly something that you thought will not happen for decades will actually start rolling. So we have to keep going, because we have to get that shift. We have to get it started as soon as possible. It's coming and we need to keep on the ball.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Eric.